Good afternoon, everybody. Going to be a quick update and a trade recap from today. We're going to talk about ES and NASDAQ, starting off with a snapshot on how the markets performed today. The bond yields are up about 0.5%. The dollar's down about 0.75. The euro's up about the same. USD JPY down about 1%. Bitcoin down about 0.75. And gold up 2.5%. Very strong day on gold today. Looking at the daily candle on ES, we had a pretty strong close, closing towards the high. We also closed higher than Friday by quite a bit. We are still showing a potential lower high if we look at the past couple of weeks. So if we zoom out a little bit here, we do have a potential lower high until we start seeing more value trading back above that 980 to 6,000 area, but definitely a good start to the week. I think I talked about this on our summary of markets on yesterday's video. I talked about how we had to have some significant buy pressure very early on in this week if we do want to start looking bullish into that prior high above 6K. So definitely a good start there. Looking at the same candle on NASDAQ today, pretty strong break of those prior highs. So if we start staying above that 600 to 700, then it looks pretty damn good to continue to the upside. So definitely want to see a continuation of this buy pressure tomorrow, or it's going to look like a pretty significant fake out on this high. Now, looking at the lower time frames here, let's talk about our trade plan today and see how it all worked out. So on ES, we looked at a couple of trade plan levels. 59.26 was our bullish trigger, I guess you would say. And holding above that level, we did hit our target at 59.44. And our next target would be around 6,000, which obviously is pretty far away. The reason why our second target is so far away, by the way, is that upper tail from Thursday is extremely weak. There's not really any significant levels that we can target in between that tail, so 44 to 6,000. So that is why the 6K level is our next major target. Now the downside, holding below 58.93, we never really held below that. We had one significant push down. I think it was on the 10 o'clock candle. We tried to stay below that and then bounced very quickly. So we never really stayed below that for a single 30-minute close. Looking at NASDAQ here, we held above the 21,397 level, obviously with a bunch of 30-minute closes there. Our first target at 630 never got hit, but if you guys were in the Discord, I did give an updated target, and it was 500. The reason I chose 500, there was a significant node there on Thursday. So that 500 target was achieved. We did not get our 630 target, so we will keep an eye on that for tomorrow. And the hold below level, 21,269, we did not have a single 30-minute close below that level, so we did not trigger a sell-off there. Okay, now talking about the trade recap for today. I did get my Addis working again, by the way. We'll talk about that during tomorrow's stream. But the first major trade, and probably the best trade of today, was that rollover top. So we had a rollover top right here on the 1 minute. I'll zoom in really quick. We had the rollover top right here where we had a significant buy pressure out of the gate. Then we had a small 1 minute high get formed around 934 to 935. We had a weak high where it pushed higher, but then it sold off very quickly. It only stayed above that high for maybe 2 minutes. So typically for a weak high, you want to see a pullback, a sell-off after that break almost immediately. So we broke the high, sold off immediately, and then the final confirmation of a rollover top is that lower high. Okay, so we had the lower high get established at 944 to 945. That was the proper entry. So you could have taken this as a sweep, where you would have sold around 59.15, stop above the prior high, which would have been around 59.20. Or you could have taken the rollover top trade, which was this right here, same level, around 59.12 to 59.14 would have been your proper entry. Stop loss above the prior high, same as before. And as you guys know, what do we target on the rollover top? We target VWAP, which would have been down here around 58.97. And we target prior lows that started the impulse up. So all of our prior lows here were basically the same target as VWAP. So you would have had to zoom out quite a ways to find that prior low, which was basically the overnight low, way down here around 75 or way down here around 68. So basically, no matter what you targeted, it would have been, I'd say, around 85 to 75. So we would have hit our VWAP target, and we also hit our prior low target. If you would have used a trailing get out instead of a get out when it was going in your favor, then you would have got out around this pullback right here. So when you started to break that ADMA, I talked about this on the morning stream. This bounce was a very strong bounce. It was a bounce about 20 points. So you would have obviously been trailed out well before that. So you would have been trailed out on this like 10-point bounce right here, or the break of that ADMA right there. If you were using the 24 EMA as your trail, you would have been trailed out around 90, which would have been a bounce of about 20 points, which that's pretty far away. Typically for my trades, I am not going to allow it to bounce 20 points before closing that trade. So very likely you would have got out for about a 10-point trail, which if you look at where the entry was, if you took the sweep entry or the rollover top entry, you don't really care that you lost 10 points there, because that's about a 30-point trade. Even if you captured a third of the move, you would have been more than happy. That was a very strong trade. Give me 1 second. Sorry, my chart is moving a little bit. There we go. So that was the first major trade and probably the best trade of the day. That was the rollover top that ended up getting trailed out around the value low. After that, which that was around 10 o'clock. Let me show you where that is on this candle here. So it would have got trailed out right around here. So after that trail out, we turned into a rotation. So we talked about this. I believe it was on the stream. If it wasn't on the stream, it was in Discord. But it turned into a rotation from the value low back into the value high. And that value high target was today's value high and also Friday's value high, which was around 59.26. So you had one big rotation, which ended up being completed around 1 p.m. So you started that rotation from the value low once that rollover top trade came to an end. So you would have been a buyer somewhere around, I'd say 85 to 90 if you would have taken that value low as your entry, or that 30-minute low sweep as your entry as well. And then you wouldn't have got out of that trade until around 1 p.m., which was around right here. This candle right here finished that rotation. So we hit the 59.26 value high, which would have completed the rotation from today's full session and from Friday's full session. Okay. And there weren't really any major threats to that trade, because the entire time that you were in that rotation, we talked about this on the live stream. If you guys were on the morning stream, you were just putting in higher lows the entire time. You were putting in higher lows and higher highs. So the market structure was very clearly bullish. And the biggest thing you want to look for when you're in a trade is the market structure, right? Is the market structure shifting against my trade? So if I took this trade and it was a bullish trade, then I want to see higher highs and higher lows. Am I starting to see lower highs? Am I starting to see lower lows? Is the market structure countering my trade? Is it going against my trade? And you basically did not see it going against your trade until about 11:30. And that 11:30 pullback was this pullback right here, which was a pretty significant pullback. So if you were holding that trade, you probably would have got stopped out. So you originally went up to around 17, and then it pulled back to VWAP, and it bounced off VWAP damn near to the tick. So that was about a 15-point pullback, which I said earlier, that's going to stop out most people. Most people are not going to allow something to pull back 10 to 15 points. And if you were on NASDAQ, let's see here, that was around, how many points was that? 415 down to 350. That was about a 50 to 60 point pullback. So same thing. you are probably not going to allow that to pull back that deep. You most likely would have been taken out of that trade. If for some reason you were using VWAP as your trail, you would have been able to hold that into the value high, which was going all the way up to 26. Now, let's say you did get trailed out. That could have possibly been another trade entry. It could have been a VWAP trade. Now, as I've said many times, I much prefer the bear flag into VWAP trade as opposed to the bull flag into VWAP. The bull flag into VWAP doesn't seem to have the same strike rate as the bear flag into VWAP. But if you were not in a trade, that bull flag into VWAP was a pretty decent trade here. You had a pretty slow grind back down to VWAP. Then you started hitting VWAP. You just barely front ran it. You were hitting it on NASDAQ. And then you had a pretty strong push up to that value high target, which once again would have been that 26 level. So you could have either had a very wide trail and held on to that rotation trade on the 30-minute time frame, or you could have used the bull flag into VWAP as your way to push up to that value high. Both of which obviously did hit your target around that 1 p.m. candle. Now, after the 1 p.m. candle, it got a little bit sloppier because it kind of became a news move. So Powell started speaking around 1 p.m. We talked about on the live stream about looking out for that speech. And when he started speaking, a lot of buy pressure started to come in. So since his speech, which was right around this candle right here, you basically protected every 30-minute low. So you tried to break this 30-minute low here. You closed above the low, so you swept the low. You tried to break the 30-minute low here. Once again, broke back above that 30-minute high, protecting the 30-minute low. I don't think... Did you break a 30-minute low? Okay, you did. You broke one 30-minute low for the rest of the day, and I wouldn't even consider that a break because, once again, that is a sweep. So you broke that 30-minute low, and you swept it. So you did not have a significant 30-minute low break since Powell started speaking at 1 p.m. And if you were in the Discord, I talked about watching that value high, which was around 5,900 to I think 5,910, I believe it was at the time. And that value high was being protected pretty much the entire time. So they kept trying to pull back into that value high, and you were not able to find any sell pressure below that value high. If I pull that back up here, I'll show you. So what time was that? That was around 1 p.m. So if I grab my volume profile here and I take it to about 1 p.m., our value high was, around 18. The POC was around 13. So we were not able to find really any significant 30-minute closes below that for the entire afternoon. So basically it turned into kind of a rebound. You broke the value high, you rebounded by pulling back into it, and then you just kept bouncing off of it for the remainder of the afternoon. And this created a what's known as a one time frame where you are breaking the 30-minute highs and you're protecting the 30-minute lows. And that was pretty much it. So just a small recap, strongest trade of the day was definitely the rollover top that happened around 9:40. And then we had a rotation trade. You could have used it as a 30-minute sweep, which was this sweep right here. You could have used the 30-minute sweep or just the standard rotation, buying the value low, looking for the value high. You could have used this bull flag into VWAP. That was a little bit harder, but if you guys are VWAP traders, if you love trading VWAP, that was a pretty clean one there. And then other than that, you were basically just breaking balance, holding the value high as support, and continuing higher. I cannot stress this enough. I talk about this all the time. Just watch the 30-minute highs and lows. They do a fantastic job giving you that bias, giving you that information on who's in control. And basically the entire afternoon today, the 30-minute candles were telling you the buyers were in control. It wasn't super clean. It was definitely a little sloppy. You had a couple of inside candles here and there, but the 30-minute lows were being protected at a much higher degree than the 30-minute highs. Every time you tried to break that 30-minute low, you did create a little bit of a sweep. Okay. But all right, guys, that is it for this recap. Hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys on tomorrow's live stream. Peace, everybody.